Okay, so, an interesting thing happened on the way to creating After the Fire and doing all this. Like most of you, I came to this experience through having the unimaginable become a reality, which really was like 10 days in the valley. The cavalry is not coming. You are the cavalry. And you're like, but I am not qualified. And it happened anyway, right? And I think that a lot of us share that experience, and we're sort of like the most moving human experience of my life was those 10 days. And it was also some of the hardest days ever. And what I noticed over the period of the next year to 2 years is that a lot of us who were right there on the front lines, we couldn't do it forever. We couldn't do it. We were tired. We had run off adrenaline for too long. During the fire, I was like, I'm so selfish for showering today. I can't believe I slept 3 hours. I need to stop that. We kind of carry that, though, all the way through the experience, which is that we are somehow not allowed to be human. One of the nicest things that happened here in the county of Sonoma was the amazing Dr. Adrienne Heinz worked with Northern Sonoma County Healthcare Foundation and created not only an app, but an entire system where we knew we had access to mental health care. Imagine that. And if we could get to somebody and sit with them, we could do group things, we could do yoga. It kind of met the community where they were at. And the app actually, like young people used it. So Adrienne's going to talk about that. Another thing that happened with the group that's coming up is some of you have known like Steve Aker my whole life, or Ari I've known, 25 years, I'm not even sure. And then Sue Farron, I actually sit on her board. She's done an intervention with me, just so you know. Like, you are out of hand. You are too hyper and too stressed out, and here's 4 things you need to do, because otherwise you're going to crack. So part of what we're talking about today is how to stay in it so that you are actually of service for the really long period of time. This is a room full of helpers. When you're a room full of helpers, you really don't like to talk about the fact that you might need help too. I did, and you're going to actually hear from people over these next 2 segments who not only helped their entire community, but I'm going to selfishly tell you that they also helped me. And I'm very grateful. So, Dr. Heinz, she will be more modest than she should be, also a trait of the helpers. And so if she's an Outside magazine. She's really like the leader when people want to talk about PTSD or PTSI after disaster, they go to Adrienne. Here is her official. Glasses down. Now you know I'm serious. In addition to her private practice, she is a research scientist at the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder at the Palo Alto VA Healthcare System and Stanford University School of Medicine. You might have heard of that school. Dr. Heinz helps improve treatments for PTSD, disaster, and addiction, develops mobile mental health applications, because don't forget the role of tech, and facilitates the implementation of mobile health technology into VA care nationwide. She currently serves as vice president of the Redwood Psychological Association. She's a local, by the way. She is from Sonoma County and she lives here in Sonoma County, and is striving to increase awareness at the intersection of climate change and mental health in California. It is a great pleasure that we welcome Dr. Adrienne Heinz to our stage.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Can y'all hear me? I'm naturally loud, but just making sure this works. Great. So I'm coming to today as a researcher, a clinician, a mother who's gotten really good at entertaining small kids in hotel rooms while evacuated, and as a member of a community that's been repeatedly devastated by wildfires. And as you can see, whether I like it or not, my professional and personal worlds have collided, as they have for most of you. And today I'm going to share a story, a hopeful one, of local grassroots bootstrapping, not bootlegging, where people came together in our community to move the needle towards healing after the fire. All right. So every day we're pouring ourselves a cup of coffee, we open our browsers on our phone, and we see headlines like this, right? Like United Nations, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying, you know, we're not doing enough to avoid the catastrophic impacts of global warming. So when we sit with and metabolize information like this over and over, and through our lived experiences here, of course, it's inevitable that our mental well-being is going to take a hit. And yet, climate change is the issue of our time, and it's up to us to still rise and meet the moment. I'm going to start by offering a little bit of vocabulary to describe what we might be feeling in relation to climate change. They say once you can name it, you can start to deal with it. So let's talk eco-anxiety. The Yale Program for Climate Change Communication recently found that up to 70% of Americans worry about global warming, and up to 50% think it's going to harm them personally in the future. It's been described as almost a pre-traumatic stress disorder. And really, as with any type of chronic stress, burnout, avoidance, and impairment of functioning is to be expected. It can lead to all of that. Then we have solastalgia, which is a special form of existential distress and grief, and it's caused by negative environmental changes. It's like a loss of sense of home or place. And it beckons questions like, what have we done? How do we go on? Do my actions really even matter? And I think what really saddens me, but where there might be hope, is with our youth. We're seeing in the data that climate change has a really profound negative impact on their well-being. There are now kind of dubbed Generation Dread. And in a survey of 10,000 global respondents aged 16 to 25, spanning 10 countries, 45% said that their feelings about climate change negatively affect their daily life and functioning. 56% think that we're doomed as humanity, and 39% are hesitant to have kids because of the effects of climate change. So I want to just take a moment to say these feelings are real. This is not a Chicken Little syndrome. There's data to support what we're going through. Now begins our own climate disaster and recovery story. October of 2017, we experienced a series of historic and deadly firestorms. The Tubbs, in particular, was marked by death and destruction. Multiple anchor points disappeared from people's lives within a matter of hours. The housing crisis worsened, leaving the undocumented and uninsured particularly vulnerable. And then after that, we had 2 subsequent fires. As a result, we had inherited a historical, shared, and cumulative trauma. Now, our community is tough. We have the whole Sonoma Strong. It's incredible, really, how resilient we have been. But as you can guess, it's really necessary to have more support. And there are a litany of barriers to getting evidence mental health care. And add in a mass disaster, and it gets even more complicated. You have the usual suspects of stigma and having enough providers who are trained, geography if you're in a rural area, the costs, there's language and cultural barriers where people who are providing services might not understand your lived experience. And then you add survivors' experiences, and then there's this sense of like, it's bad, but it's not so bad I need help because I have a million other things I have to do. So it's really an uphill battle. And we knew this was going to be a huge public health problem. And what do? Well, we created the Wildfire Mental Health Collaborative. This was coordinated through the Northern Sonoma County Healthcare Foundation. And we put together a steering committee from people of all walks, professional associations, hospitals, schools, faith organizations, FEMA, and the county. And this collaborative was made up of health championships, many who lost their homes, who knew that the mental health related challenges of living through disaster was gonna take some work. So we had 3 goals. We wanted to create a model for deploying resources and supporting our community. So I'll talk about 3 that we did today. It's trauma-informed yoga, therapist training, and an evidence-informed protocol for disaster, and then a mobile mental health app, Sonoma Rising. The second goal was level that playing field, democratize access to services, ensure that cost, access, English proficiency, stigma, geography, they're not going to get in the way for anybody that wants a little bit of help. Uh-oh. I'll keep talking. And then the third goal was we wanted to measure it. The data nerd in me said, you know what, we're doing something pretty unique, and how nice would it be not to reinvent the wheel here? So we worked together to forge a partnership with Stanford University and the VA National Center for PTSD to evaluate and publish our efforts so that the scientific community could access them in perpetuity. So the first service rollout was trauma-informed yoga. Do we have any yoga fans in here? Oh, okay, all right. So trauma-informed yoga is a little different. It offers a physically and psychologically safe and tailored practice to learn how to respond versus react to trauma symptoms. We trained 60 instructors in this protocol, offered 160 classes, and touched over 2,000 souls. Just a little bit more detail on it. It emphasizes diaphragmatic breathing, meditation, vagus nerve release, and restorative postures that engage the parasympathetic nervous system to reduce the hyperarousal and disassociation. So essentially, you're shifting out of fight or flight to rest and digest. The second service rollout was training over 400 therapists and paraprofessionals in skills for psychological recovery. That's a trauma-informed structured protocol that provides concrete skills to people going through the aftermath of a disaster. This protocol is really flexible, and it can be administered in a lot of different settings by different people, providers of different skill levels. And the goal is it is meant to reduce distress, identify coping skills, improve daily functioning, and hopefully lower the need for formal mental health treatment later down the road. And the idea was also, let's train a cohort of therapists on how to manage and be prepared for the next disaster. Now, the third service rollout that I'm going to talk about is a free mobile mental health app called Sonoma Rises. I'm an admitted digital health evangelist, not evangelical. And I want to just talk about briefly, we have an app portfolio that's free by the VA, but it's meant for anybody, community members, of apps that do not collect your data, do not sell it, and they're based in science. And they address things like drinking, relationships, PTSD, COVID. And so I get my heart behind this work because technology resources can democratize access to science-based trauma resources, not only during the crisis, but beyond when people are displaced and busy. They also improve health equity because they're scalable, and they offer this mental health safety net that otherwise wouldn't be there. So this Sonoma Rises app, it launched October 8th, exactly 1 year after the Tubbs fire. It's free, available in English and Spanish, both Android and iOS. I'll mention that it's no longer available on the app and Google Play stores because we lost funding to maintain it. But this is what it used to look like. And users could access help with coping with stress, healing from loss, prioritizing self-care, connecting with others, managing that anger and irritability that comes with being in survival mode a long time, and then tracking their mood with validated assessments. And these are some instances of our community outreach in schools, health fairs, and pipe texting campaigns we did in large organizations that a lot of people get behind us. And our social media outreach in English and Spanish. That's the gram, Insta. And I will say we had a lot of small wins in this work, but we had a whole lot of failures, and we made some mistakes. And so my gift to you today is to tell you 4 things that we learned that hopefully you can take and run with and not do that. So the first is tackle those barriers to care. Meet folks where they are. I've heard that said over and over today. We need to explore more digital solutions because they're an equalizer. They address the demand-supply issue. They recognize when scalability is constrained, and they can reach the displaced. Right now, California mental health providers cannot practice across state lines, and residents cannot receive services. And that's not the case for 31 other states that have reciprocity. So we need a policy change to help people get access to care quickly and get a better quality of care. Number 2, we have proactive planning and rapid funding. So we're finding ourselves scrambling to reinvent the wheel each disaster, and yes, they have their unique circumstances, but we'd really benefit from having a holistic health response plan in place before disaster strikes. We can't expect therapists to work for free, for volunteers just to pour in, 60 hours a week. It's not sustainable. We need to have funds for mental health services and evaluation to be accessible so that we can rapidly address the needs of the community, so that we can prevent more serious mental health struggles 3-4 years later down the road. 3, let's get sustainable. FEMA goes away roughly after 18 months, and government agencies and nonprofits, they're largely, understandably, thinking about the physical, the financial, the environmental recovery, and only more recently are we starting to appreciate what are the long-term mental health needs. So things like finding ways to fund apps that can be tailored easily for other disasters, rather than having these projects sunset when the acute crisis is over. And the 4th lesson, promoting psychoeducation and health literacy. Disaster survivors are incredibly busy people. And between all the competing priorities, mental health can get lost in the mix. We've seen people hit that 6-month wall where things just start to unravel because you can't keep living in survival mode without getting adequate support. So we have to educate folks on what to expect emotionally after disaster, how to care for themselves, and when to seek professional help. Another thing that we noticed, that I'm sure many of you have too, is that survivors often compare themselves to others who had it worse, and perhaps minimize the need for support. For example, many people didn't understand that the resources that were provided were for anyone that was impacted, not just people that lost their home. They didn't want to take someone's spot. So we have to explain, everybody has needs, and this is for the community to heal. It's not just for those who lost everything. Okay, and then finally, I want to share the results of our findings. They've been peer-reviewed in Psychological Services, a journal of the American Psychological Association. I also want to take a moment to offer thanks and gratitude to all my collaborators who made this work possible. It took a village to do this, and I'm humbled to present before you representing this work. And then this was a follow-up study with Sonoma Rises. We evaluated it with adolescents who lost their homes and suffered damage to their school. And this was published also in Psychological Services last month, I believe, 2 months ago. And I share this work to highlight the importance of looking at adolescents. This generation obviously has the heaviest burden to bear, and so we need to focus more research on how better to support them as they enter the age of megafires. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this story offers validation of what you might be feeling and hope for meaning and taking action in this battle of our lives, which is climate change. So please reach out anytime, and I'd love to hear from you.